How did BookTok even come to existence? Well, the most reliable information I could find was that a TikTok user named Kate Jacobs started a TikTok account dedicated to talking about books and sharing their thoughts and opinions and giving recommendations. According to their own blog post, they saw a user named Kathy Allen Davids using the term BookTok when recommending some books and decided to use that term in their videos too. In March 2020, one of their videos revolving around the topic of BookTok blew up and the community started growing. In my opinion, BookTok is basically the translation of the phenomenon of book clubs to the modern world. It is the most modern interpretation of book clubs. I mean, people always loved to share their thoughts and opinions on the things that they've read. Just for the sake of understanding just how prominent book clubs are from our early modern history, let's just quickly travel through the timeline of the development of book clubs. In all of the sources that I could find, the earliest book club is attributed to Anne Hutchinson, the book club that she founded in 1634, and it was basically a scripture reading circle. So the club was a London club founded in February 1764 by an artist Joshua Reynolds and an essayist Samuel Johnson. And unlike the modern clubs, it was a very prestigious establishment with a rigorous selection process. It was not limited to literature. Members discussed politics, social issues, as well as debated literature and art. In the 19th century New York, many book clubs for women started appearing, as women were thriving to receive the education they were deprived of for so long. Around the same time, in 1821, the first book club for black men appeared, and soon after that, in 1827, the book club for black women appeared called the Society of Young Ladies. The latter two not only served as book clubs, but also sponsored and helped the abolitionist speakers, since in many US states at the time, slavery was still allowed and enslaved people were literally punished for being literate. In the 20th century, Oprah's book club appeared, leveraging the television in order to spread and promote reading, but arguably most importantly to leverage Oprah's fame in order to turn certain books into bestsellers. That show had seen some controversies, from the fabrication scandals with the book A Million Dollar Pieces, to accusations of appropriating Mexican-American experience in American Dirt, to a more recent one in 2020 when the book My Dark Vanessa was abruptly dropped from the book club. In January 2007, Goodreads launched, and since then it had been the largest book club for sharing and discussing opinions on books and rating them and giving their reviews. It had been until BookTube and Bookstagram appeared, and later BookTok. The accessibility, variety of content and formats is arguably the reason why the BookTok TikTok community grew up so large so fast. There currently are plenty of very valid criticisms to TikTok, from romanticization of abuse covered as dark romance, to tokenism instead of actual good representation, to inequitable algorithms. These all are very valid criticisms of BookTok. I'm not going to argue that it's not. However, I want to talk about a much broader and louder claim that I've seen on so many platforms. BookTok has ruined reading. So what are the most common complaints that I've seen in regard to this claim? So the first one is the obsession with smut. Everyone is obsessed with smut. It's all about smut. Addiction to smut is the same as addiction to adult films. First of all, let's quickly establish that no, they are not the same. Starting from the personal impact, books provide a much less immediate and overwhelming stimulus, so to consume this type of content, more energy is required, making it arguably less addictive for the consumer. Actually, now I'm thinking, I think that this is why the phenomenon of, did I say that word correctly? Whatever. The thing with deepfakes spread like wildfire, because it is one, you can imagine lots of different graphic things, but seeing something, even if it's not as graphic as you could have imagined, is way more impactful for the viewer. However, the main critique about the adult film industry is the fact that there are real people that are victims of abuse that is rampant in that industry. Many cases of actors and former actors coming forward with their stories of being abused while participating in the industry are shocking. The numbers are crazy. While books can reinforce some harmful narratives and set unrealistic expectations, they do not pose an imminent threat to a real person, as this is an imagination-based content. On one hand, I understand the frustration with this absolute obsession with smut and all the, oh, is this book spicy? Oh, are the men in this book hot? Like, it is annoying. I also saw some vile instances of someone asking, is there smut in crime and punishment? But I think at that point, what came to my mind was, it is probably freaking rage bait. And lots of cases when people ask, is there smut in some classic books that are so far from that, I think it may be rage bait. But the popularity of erotic fiction as a genre is not a new phenomenon. I'm pretty sure that historically speaking, there have been multiple spikes of popularity in erotic fiction, but they always had something to do with the shifts in society happening simultaneously with them. Starting from the ancient and classical periods, works such as Ars Amatoria by Ovid were products of the time when society had a much more open attitudes towards themes like that. So in the 1960s and 70s, sex revolution resulted in renewed interest in literature like that, with works such as Naked Lunch by William S. Burroughs becoming an icon of counterculture movement of the 60s. The themes of sexual liberation and civil rights resonated a lot with the society at the time. This has also been the time when the LGBT rights movement was at its rise, with the Stonewall riots happening in 1969, and literature of the time represented the social climate. The rise of internet and accessibility of such content privately online resulted in, again, a rise in interest in such literature, with authors like E.L. James capitalizing on that with her 50 Shades of Grey. So how does that relate to the obsession that people now seem to have with smut? To be honest with you, by the time I'm filming this video, I actually think that it is declining already, and we already passed the time when it was at its peak. However, the thing that probably triggered an increase in interest again was probably the change in how society treats women's sexualities and women talking about these topics that previously were not ladylike to talk about. What I mean is, there's concept of female gaze and male gaze. And important note, I do think that they do not equate to good and bad. Both female gaze and male gaze can reinforce some harmful ideas and healthy ideas. It's just the difference in the point of view. So for the longest time, most of the explicit content was created through the male gaze, with all the imagery and content pandering to men. However, with the rise of books named Kingdom of this and this and For This and This, female authors seem to be writing more and more for women, targeting them in their content and in what they write, which obviously created interest towards that because it is pretty much a new product on the market. Can those books be harmful and reinforce some crazy toxic ideas? Yes. Hello, Penelope Douglas. However, I don't think that TikTok is exclusively to blame for that. Literature is a very reflective form of art, so any changes that are happening in society are going to be reflected in the stories at the time. The second argument that I've heard most often is that books promoted on BookTok, they lack depth and they make people read shallow literature. Though our productions have afforded more extensive and unaffected pleasure than those of any other literary corporation in the world, no species of composition has been so much decried. From pride, ignorance, or fashion, our foes are almost as many as their readers. This is the quote from Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. In that book, she gives some very interesting criticisms on how readers and writers at the time very often diminished the importance and value of romance novels, talking about them as this lower level of literature, despite the fact that many people enjoyed them dearly and that actually introduced them to reading. There have been many conversations around how shallow and repetitive the books on BookTok are, and how a result of that is now publishers prefer to publish the books and ideas that prove to be successful on BookTok rather than some deep, unique reflections of new authors. However, I'd also like to make a couple of points here. First of all, large publishing companies have always been super difficult to reach, and because they are businesses by their nature, it is in their nature to publish something that will have commercial success. It is in their interest. And some deep and unique and valuable reflections of new authors may just not align with this idea of commercial success. Here, TikTok actually can be utilized for the good. Self-publishing authors can actually leverage the potential for virality of their content, for their videos to go viral on TikTok, and for the potential readers to actually learn about their product without having to put lots of resources and time and money into reaching these large publishing companies. I think there has been an author, Alex Astor, who published a book called Lightlark that actually first went viral on TikTok and then earned its audience. This provides authors that do not have as many resources and opportunities to reach large publishing companies to actually introduce their work to the masses. Well, it is important to remember that BookTok is a virtual space on TikTok that follows TikTok algorithms. So, if all you see on your For You page is just people talking about smut or some disgusting, outrageous scenarios from books like Colleen Hoover or Penelope Douglas, it is likely that you interact with that content. You may send it to your friends to laugh about it, you may write a hateful comment, but the platform thinks that this is what you're interested at, and these are the types of videos that the algorithm puts on your For You page because you interact with them. It is important to remember that from the very beginning of YouTube, from the very beginning of internet, rage bait content had been arguably the most profitable format because people engage with it more than they do with positive content. So it is very likely that half of the videos that you see that are just outrageous and horrendous are part of this type of content, of rage bait content that is designed for you to have a very strong reaction and interact with it. This is often explained by a thing called the negativity bias, which is basically, it talks about how negative content has a larger impact on our behavior rather than positive content. So the general perception of BookTok as this place that is all about objectively problematic content may simply be inaccurate. There is a huge number of BookTok creators that make amazing content and talk about really interesting books and not those 15 books you see everywhere and that have the recommended by BookTok stickers in bookstores. I'm going to either here or in the captions, I'm going to mention the booktokers that I personally love to see, and you may check them out and interact with their content so that you can customize your For You page according to your interests. So finally, what I'd like to finish this video with is BookTok has made a great contribution to increasing the numbers of teenagers reading. You could argue that it made reading an aesthetic, you could argue that it made reading unserious, but you cannot argue with the fact that teenagers read more because of BookTok. And the chances of them starting to read books like Colleen Hoover's, I don't know, It Ends With Us, It Starts With Us, I don't remember, and then moving on to a more serious and substantial literature are higher than if they just do not start to read at all. So no, BookTok did not ruin reading, it did not make it worse, it made it different. And I would actually argue that it has a potential to make reading better. Reading information about new indie authors, to pushing for more inclusivity, to encouraging people to actually read. Saying that BookTok ruined literature and reading seems quite snobby when it has so many opportunities, it has so much potential to be utilized in an incredibly helpful way. There are problems with it, but ultimately, I think it brought much more good than negative. I kind of want to make a video on all the criticisms that I believe are valid about BookTok because there is plenty. I just do not want to generalize and say that, oh, the reading is ruined because there are bad things to BookTok. No, that's a little foolish. But I do want to talk about the things that I really dislike on BookTok, so maybe I'll make a video about that. But for now, that is the end of this video, of me protecting BookTok as if it's my child. Yeah, subscribe!